Hey guys, it's Donnie B, and you're listening to episode 12 of Eat It Up, Buffalo Eat's own podcast and a proud member of Audio Buffalo. Today in the podcast, we have another proud member of Audio Buffalo, Ethan Cox, who you can hear on the Craft Beer Talk program. Ethan is also the president of Community Beer Works, which is a nano brewery that's opening over on the west side of Buffalo. They just recently had a Kickstarter fund, and I believe they're in the final stages of opening. We kind of caught them about a month ago when they were still doing some construction around the place and finishing up little loose ends here and there. But they should be opening within a couple of weeks. I know that Blue Monk just recently announced that they were planning a March 15th dinner pairing with their craft or Community Beer Works beer. So keep on the lookout for that. But he joined us to talk about food and brewery, and he also brought Rudy Watkins, who's the head brewer at Community Beer Works. And we kind of just talked about how it all got started, how their love of beer began, and talked about Buffalo's brewing scene. And we even had the pleasure of sampling a couple of their beers that may or not be available in the near future. So it was a really good time. I mean, anytime a guest brings delicious beer, it's a good podcast. So we had a really fun talk, and I hope you guys enjoy it. And thanks for listening. I was figuring if we could have some of the beer a little bit into the podcast.
Sure. I don't want to. It's your pacing. We're just here. We didn't.
I don't want to step on the toes of craft beer talk or anything.
No, that's fine. No. It's whatever you want to do. For sure, man.
What were you guys doing at the brewery today?
I was waterproofing a floor, which is really, really exciting. And then a lot of sweeping and cleaning. Ethan was caulking some of the walls in the fermentation chambers.
It's too much fun. We have... we're nearing the end of what we would consider, I guess, the formal construction, the stuff that's contracted out. And so we're really jamming on the stuff that we have to do. Yeah. And this month's going to be like an intense amount of work, a lot of like long days, just trying to get... We got together the other night and came up with a list of all the small things. And when you add up all the small things, it's
kind of like when you're moving and you're like, awesome, everything's set, and you realize there's still that 1% of stuff that you can't put in a box, and you don't really know what to do with it, and you're like, well, this is going to take me as long as putting everything in boxes. This is terrible.
Yeah. So.
I mean, has it really amped up after the Kickstarter ended, or...
I think that there's some recent developments that I guess are we.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want you guys to say anything if it's not ready. Or
well, we have a time frame now for opening that's far more realistic than any time frame we've had up till now.
Right. I mean, more based on facts. And
so suddenly. Things that we hadn't done because we were like, oh, who knows when, blah, blah, blah. Suddenly it's now's the time to do it. Now. I
mean, anyone who's followed the blog on the site, I mean, I saw that you guys got that transformer or whatever.
Yeah, the power.
The power.
So, I mean, that's probably huge, right?
That is huge.
That is, and that job isn't quite finished yet, but it was really cool. I've never actually seen anybody put up a new utility pole, so it was pretty cool right there and there. And then they hooked it up to the building, but now the contracted electricians need to come in, move everything over to the new board, and wire the rest of the stuff up that isn't wired up. So that's about the last of the formal contracted stuff, plus all the little things.
Nice.
Yeah.
So I guess I kind of want to start at the beginning of how this whole thing started. Like, how'd you guys come together and decide to start a brewery?
Ethan was wearing a Mogwai shirt, I think. It was really...
Wait, the band or the
band? Not the small gremlin creature. Right. But no, I think I met Ethan at Mr. Good Bar. Yep. I think I'd probably seen you around a few times before, but I met him. He was wearing a Mogwai shirt. I commented on it, and then we just kind of started talking.
Nice.
At that time, I was toying with a lot of different ideas about maybe doing something beery in Buffalo. I had already thought about doing something like the Village Beer Merchant, but then they did that, which I guess means that it was a good idea.
Yeah.
Then I was thinking of doing something kind of not quite exactly like, but similar enough to the Blue Monk that when Mike went ahead and did that, I decided that must have been a good idea.
Right? Yeah, I'd say so. That place is ridiculous.
They're jamming, right? And, at the end of the day, I'm a home brewer for a long time, as is Rudy here, and so, the idea of serving other people's beers is not horrible.
Yeah.
But it's certainly not actually what I had ever really aspirated to do in my heart of hearts. I like making the stuff. So a brewery was the next natural digression. And when we first started hanging out, the idea I was really kind of pursuing, and that I first roped him into helping with, was the idea of maybe doing like a home brewing collective.
Oh, okay.
So I know some people who've gotten together to rent a space where they put all their shop equipment.
Yeah.
And so they have a nice wood shop somewhere, and they all pay towards the utility bills and the month's rent.
Nice.
And they leave their wood there and whatever, and they can always go down and do that. I'm like, well, that would be a great idea for brewing.
Yeah.
I knew a lot of people who were brewing in the city who, like I often had to drag all their equipment out from their basement or from their closet, set it all up, and it just adds another hour or 2 hours to your brew day to have to set everything up and take it all down.
Yeah.
And even if it doesn't add time, it adds pain in the buttness.
That works.
So, right. So I thought, well, guys like me who are in this urban setting where we can't have a room or a half room dedicated to our brewing setup would benefit from something like this. So that was the scheme that we started trying to pursue.
Yeah.
And that ultimately morphed into, wait a minute, how about just a brewery?
Right.
What are we doing? Yeah.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so like, how did you guys even figure out how to build a brewery like from scratch?
We have,
because home brewing is one thing. I
Right.
think there's enough information out there on the internet, and it's
Right.
become like a hobby for the last 25, 30 years, ever since Jimmy Carter
Right.
signed it into law.
Right.
But how do you guys find out how to make a brewery?
I think there's a bunch of us in the project, and
Yeah.
there's no way we could have done it without all of us.
Yeah.
So we have Dave, who kind of does everything, and Dave is the person who goes through the gigantic documents from the state that list the requirements, and then Dave says, here's the 50 points that we need to hit.
Okay.
And then we have Greg, who's an architect, and we can say, Greg, how do we hit these 50 points? And everyone's strengths kind of come together, and it works out wonderfully. But individually, none of us could have done this.
Yeah, it's a team effort. I mean, the community and community beer work starts with us, because there's a bunch of us, and with the pooled talent and the pooled ambition and the pooled ability, frankly, was necessary for this. I mean, I know lots of people start breweries just themselves or a couple people, but this team, I love it, and I think we all bring something to it. But the other side of it is, as far as like the brewing knowledge goes, I mean, because we are this nano brewery or whatever, to see our setup, it is a home brewing setup. I mean, we didn't have to learn anything new, because what we've done is we've taken a home brewing setup and we've scaled it up to a size that's sort of ridiculous in every home brewer's wet dream.
Are you buying these like things and you're just like, I can't wait. It's like Christmas. You're just like,
oh my God,
yeah,
the stainless steel. Yeah, I mean, it sat there quietly mocking us for the last year, but now the joke's about to be on it, because we're gonna use the hell out of it. So yeah, I mean, it's not. It's I don't want to undersell it. Say it's not sophisticated, but it's not like if you've been to a brewery, if you've toured certainly Anheuser-Busch, but even something as small as like Elkidville, our rig is much more like a giant home brewing rig. So we will have to adjust for scaling up recipes. That's Brody's the lead brewer, and so he's in charge of figuring out, okay, you don't just multiply everything by 10. Right.
Yeah,
turns out
that sounds. That sounds like that's going to be a pretty.
Yeah, and there's really no way to figure out what's going to happen until we actually run some beer through the system.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a lot of quick adjusting when we first start actually brewing.
For sure.
Yeah.
Because it may come out, hey, there's not enough or too much bitterness, or the hop aroma is not where we want it.
Yeah.
And we're just going to have to kind of on the fly figure that part out.
That'll be exciting.
It will be exciting. No, it's fun. It's 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 a good thing.
So how did you both actually get into beer? Like, what was your breaking in point where you decided that you loved beer?
Go.
Okay, for a long time I hated beer, and I would specifically go across the border to Ontario and get Mike's Hard Lemonade, which in Ontario was made with vodka. In the States, it was always a malt drink, and I never liked it in the States. In Ontario, it was made with vodka, and I would get that. And then at some point, I started drinking Saranac or something like that.
Yeah.
And then a friend and I would go to Premier, and just we fell in love somehow with hoppy beers. And we'd go to Premier and we'd buy Dogfish Head 90 Minute when it was back in the big 750s, and we'd get Hop Devil and whatever was available at that point, and just kind of totally became obsessed with it. And then 10 or 11 years ago, my parents got me a homebrewing kit, and my first batches were terrible. But I kept at it because I love cooking.
Yeah.
I love the process and the science behind it.
Yeah.
And now we're here.
Yeah. For myself, I became aware of homebrewing when my dad remarried. My stepbrothers had done some homebrews.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was pretty young, so for the next few years, I think, I knew that homebrewing existed, but I didn't really care. And, my first beers were Blue and Moosehead and whatever else you might expect.
Yeah.
And then I went to college in Boston in the early 90s.
Sam Adams.
Yeah, and Sam Adams was like everywhere all of a sudden already. And because they were a few years older, but starting to creep in on top of that was a layer of Pete's Wicked Ale and Sierra Nevada. Mm-hmm. And other more flavorful beers, what we call craft today, but at the time there wasn't even a separate really word for them.
Yeah.
And so I started drinking those beers too, and I was just like, these are great. And that's when I remembered about homebrewing. I was like, oh, wait a minute. I'm actually not 21, so it's always a pain to get these. And but you can make beer like this, it turns out. Why not?
Yeah.
So I started hanging out with people who already had kits and learning kind of from them. Yeah. And the whole time I was in Boston, I never really did it on my own, but I helped a lot of people do it. And then when I moved from Boston to Tucson for graduate school, I suddenly didn't know anybody who already had a homebrewing kit. And so I was like, where's the homebrewing store in Tucson? And so graduate school was about as much about getting my PhD as it was learning how to beer. That's what I did, aside from video games and whatever else.
Come into that.
So yeah, by the time I moved back to Buffalo, I had 15 years of homebrewing experience and got involved in the homebrewing scene here, and kind of that's how this got here. Do
you guys have like a memory when you made your own beer and you thought this actually tastes as good as things I've had? Like, was there like that point where you were like, this is actually
I think so, and I think it was a few years in. I mean, I'd made some good stuff, but I never made anything that wowed me. And then I think it was actually like a IPA kit from Niagara Tradition, and it couldn't have been more than 7 years ago. Mm-hmm. I don't know. And it was just, how did I make this in my closet on Richmond Avenue? How did this happen? But yeah, it was a revelation. Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, same here. I mean, my first few batches were certainly drinkable, but even then I wasn't a very sophisticated beer drinker yet. But even then I was like, yeah, these are okay, but I'm sure it gets better. So I just kept at it. And I do remember my first batch that I was like, wow, I would pay for this. I would pay for. I did pay for it, actually. I bought the ingredients. But yeah, I mean... And I gladly gave that to friends. And from there on, I've certainly had batches that didn't measure up to that standard, but more hits than misses.
Yeah,
it's compelling. It's compelling hobby.
When before I ever was a big foodie guy, I was like a huge beer guy. Like I worked at Consumers one summer, and I went from guy who's like my adventurous beer was Blue Moon to oh my god, just like a wall. And then me and the employees would have a beer club. So every payday,
cool.
We'd buy each of us would buy 2 6-packs, and then we'd swap out with everybody. And so we just made our way through the entire.
Fun.
But and then I was like, I should try to do this. And my dad got me one of those Mr. Beer kits.
Oh yeah, sure, yeah.
And it was like the worst experience. It was just the horrible.
It's funny because if you use those kits as directed, you're definitely not going to make good beer.
Yeah.
But there's nothing wrong with the equipment itself. And as a home brewer, I've used those to make lagers when I didn't have a spare fridge, because you can make 2 gallons of a lager and you can stick it in your fridge and let it condition for 6 weeks if you can wait that long, which you can. So it's kind of the little equipment itself is okay, but that packet is just like a bunch of really old malt extract and cane sugar, and
it was a nightmare. He thought it was cool. He's like, oh, you said you wanted to make some beer, and so he thought he got me this great kit, and I was like, all right. And then I remember opening up a packet, and I was like, this doesn't look like what I've seen on TV. I guess before we go any further, do you want to try or sample?
Sure.
Or can I try?
Well, absolutely.
So we brought 2 beers. Should we do the Rogan beer first?
Sure. Right. Let's do that first.
Okay.
So, actually, why don't I pour so you can explain?
All right. So this is a German wheat beer with rye. Okay. It's got a lot of banana, some clove, a little nice dryness from the rye.
I apologize for not having proper glasses.
No, that's fine. It happens. It's not a problem. And ultimately, I like the way this beer turned out.
Yeah.
Ultimately, this is not a beer I necessarily wanted to brew. I wanted to brew a Weizenbock, which is a big, dark, strong, like Aventinus Weizenbock.
Yeah.
But I didn't have enough yeast, because the stronger the beer, the more yeast you need.
Yeah.
And the easiest way for me to increase the amount of yeast I had was to brew another beer and then harvest the yeast out of that.
Wow.
So this was kind of a nice little, experiment that ended up... with 5 gallons of drinkable beer, and then I got to brew the beer I really wanted to brew afterwards.
Nice. Well, thank you.
So, yeah, absolutely.
Cheers.
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 Hey, guys, just wanted to jump in here and tell you about 2 more of our sponsors. First one is NOCO. Visit NOCO.com/podcast and find out how you can earn $20 in SaberBucks. And by VIPSeats.com. Score your Buffalo Sabres tickets at VIP Seats. Select seats starting as low as $44. Call 1-800-371-6323 or visit VIPSeats.com. And now, back to the podcast.
Oh, I can smell that banana. Oh, it's got a really nice mouthfeel to it. That's really nice.
Cool.
Wow. I like that. I can actually, the banana actually is pretty...
Yeah, and that's all from the yeast. So that's the phenols. That
so there's not actual banana...
There's no actual banana in there, but what's the name of the chemical that the yeast gives off?
That's isoamyl acetate.
Right.
Jesus.
So it's a yeast from...
I don't remember seeing that in my Mr. Beer kit.
Not in there, no. It's a yeast from a traditional German brewery that you can, buy commercially.
Yeah.
And then it gives this character to the beer.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I really like it. Have you guys, do you have an idea in your head of what kind of beers you want to offer when you open shop? Have you been working on specific recipes?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Rudy's been prototyping a lot.
we had our pale ale nailed down. We knew exactly. It was a big hoppy American pale ale.
Yeah,
and then lots of crazy people like us are opening breweries, and it's been a bad year for the hop harvest. So we wanted to use this hop called Citra. Which is just delicious and lemony and it's wonderful
great
stuff. But we couldn't get enough of it, so we had to switch it around a little bit.
Yeah.
And the beer we're coming out is super awesome. It's not a Citra beer. It's been changed around a bit. But we're coming out with an American pale ale and also with we're going to call it an American brown ale. It's a stronger, a little richer, a little maltier, nice hop character brown ale. And those should be available the day we open.
Nice.
And then going on from there, we're going to have a porter, we're going to have a saison, we're going to do, in the long term, a bunch of sour beers.
Seasonals, probably.
Some seasonals, yeah, absolutely.
I actually had my first sour beer not too long ago.
Oh, yeah? What'd you have?
God. I think it was called, Lover something. It was...
Lover, it's Italian, yeah.
Yeah,
Lover beer.
yeah. It was really good. I've never had it. And
Was that down at Blue Monk?
Mm-hmm, yeah. And I thought the name of a sour beer just intrigued me. How could that be a delicious thing?
They're amazing, especially with something like roast duck or something like that. They're just the acidity cuts through the fat,
fries.
and there you go. Acidity cutting through the fat is one of my favorite. Oh.
Yeah, sour beers are great. And
it seems like that's a new a vogue thing.
It's
right now.
definitely
They're
was
trending.
Yeah, 5 years ago they were not huge, and there were the traditional people in Belgium making them, a couple people in California, a couple people in commercially in Denver. Or Colorado, and now they're the new hot thing, and lots of people are making them. Some are doing great jobs, some not so great jobs.
They're hard to make right, and they take a long time, and they tie up a fair amount of your capacity, and you kind of need to get to a separate barrel aging program, and they're a challenging thing to brew.
Yeah.
So I don't think we're ever going to see them as ubiquitous as IPAs, which are finally starting to fade a little bit.
Yeah.
But I do think that we're going to see more sours over the next few years for sure. I mean, it's a trend that's continuing.
Yeah.
But I can't see it ever being as crazy as IPAs got.
Yeah.
Just because of the complexity that is required to make them.
Right.
And I don't think they're to everybody's palate, and that's okay. I'm a big fan of pretty much every style of beer. There's some I like better than others.
Yeah.
But I'm never bothered by somebody saying well, I don't like hoppy beers, or I don't like malty beers, or I don't like sour beers. What I'm bothered by is people who say I don't like any beer, because I'm like, really? Have you tried the vast array of beer styles out there? Because unless you really hate all beverages, I can't believe there isn't a beer style out there that isn't to your
That's got to be people who think like, well, there's Budweiser and then there's Guinness. Like
that's what
oftentimes that is the case. Or they're very into, for example, wine, which is fine. Wine's a perfectly decent beverage, but there are beers that are on the border of wininess.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Unlike there are wines that are on the border of beeriness. I've never run across one of them. However, I don't
remember what it was. I wrote it down, but it was Australian, and I was like, this tastes. There's a lot of Australian hop character in there. It's amazing.
Oh wow, I'd like to try that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I do think there's a beer for just about every palate. You know.
Yeah. And I think it's important for people to try to kind of broaden their horizon, because certainly talking about sour beers. When Blue Monk opened and they started bringing sour beers, I thought they wouldn't sell at all, because it's one of those things I wouldn't suggest to people who weren't adventurous or open-minded.
And I mean, even the name almost would scare people.
Yeah, people don't necessarily like it. Maybe they like salt and vinegar chips, but they don't really like sour things. But so many places around here now, just when they get a sour beer in, they sell like crazy.
Yeah, I mean that
and it warms my heart. But
I mean, that one I had, the Lover Beer or Lover Boy, whatever it was.
Yeah, the Lover Beer. Yeah,
it was,
and it's really oaky, as I recall.
Yeah,
and
it had a really rich flavor, and it was I don't know, it was mind opening, I guess.
Yeah. Good.
I mean,
that's awesome.
Do you worry about the opposite effect though, that Ethan, as you know, on Audio Buffalo, one of our sponsors, is Consumers, and they say,
I've heard of them,
and they say beer is the new wine.
Yeah, well,
it's not. I don't think it's there yet.
I believe we made some mockery of that in the last show. Actually, with all due respect to our fine sponsors, Neil, if you're listening to this, really. But no, we don't. I mean,
but I guess my question is there any worry that some of that pretentiousness that comes with wine enthusiasts would seep into the beer community? There's that part where you almost start hate talking about beer with people.
I think it will, but
I mean, you can't control it to it.
It's how you want to look at it. There's a lot of pretentiousness in the wine world, but there's a lot of really awesome wines that you can get for less than $10 a bottle. You can also spend $5,000 on something.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think beer will ever get to the insane costs of I hope not. I would.
There are beers out there you could pay a lot of money for if you really wanted to.
Yeah.
But I figure that's one of the hazards of success.
Yeah.
And you don't have to participate in it, and you can say, well, of course, this is what's going to happen when something blows up this big. And it has actually some positive aspect to it, but that doesn't mean you need to partake in it, right? I mean, if something's big enough that it's attracting haters, then it can't be totally sucking.
Yeah.
Right? Does that make sense? You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, I think that was
I don't know.
Sam from Dogfish had that whole post about
this was big news.
Yeah, it was like just a couple of months ago, I think, how people were ripping apart Dogfish because they weren't indie. They didn't have their indie cred anymore, or whatever.
Small enough anymore.
Well, every band wants to get to the HSBC or whatever we call it now. Eventually, right?
Yeah.
So
I mean, the best part is that it expands your audience. I mean, what you guys are going to be making.
It expands the audience, and it expands people's appreciation for, hey, beer isn't just Budweiser. It's something I can drink with good food. It's something that I can sit down and think about like I would a whiskey or a bourbon or something like that.
Yeah.
And that's the positive side of it, and then the negative side is the extreme geekery. But I'm guilty of extreme geekery sometimes.
Right.
So.
I'm sympathetic to the extreme geekery.
Yeah. I mean,
sure.
I think I enjoy geeking out about.
By sympathetic, I mean a part of it.
I guess it's all I guess in how you express it and how you treat other people who maybe don't have that knowledge or
right.
I mean because you guys have you noticed that especially even with the Kickstarter that was really popular.
It's great.
Do you think you guys have followers or people who actually are just becoming into beer because they've heard about your project, or do you feel like you guys are maybe poised to be some type of
spreading the gospel?
Yeah, something like that.
We want to be spreading the gospel. I hope we are.
Because I mean, I guarantee
there's educations.
Yeah, there's like over 1,000 people probably that I didn't look at the exact number that funded it. And there's probably a portion of those people who maybe aren't right now craft beer lovers.
Some of our funders and some of our fans may be more into us because we're of Buffalo than because of the beer that they haven't had yet because we don't make it.
Yeah.
So there's that. We hope, though, that everybody who's a fan of ours, and especially those who threw us money at Kickstarter, thanks again, want the beer and are excited about that. But
do you guys see that educational side ever being a part of the brewery itself?
It's huge.
Definitely.
Okay. It's huge. I mean, it's huge in the very boring sense that if you're a business, you have to educate your consumers about your product. It's also important because, and I know Rudy shares this, but I have this academic background too, and I've been in the education business, and that's a cynical take on it, but it's also true. I've been in the education business for a long time, and I like teaching, and I like explaining stuff to people, and so I can be a good evangelist for our own products because I totally believe in it, and I love drinking beer.
Yeah.
That's why that protects, I guess, a little bit against the worst of the snobbery too, because I see somebody who doesn't know this stuff as an opportunity to teach rather than to mock or to dismiss for not being on top of it.
Yes. Yeah.
But I mean, we couldn't be doing what we're doing today if it weren't for the educational efforts of Tim Herzog over the last 11 years. I mean, that dude worked tirelessly, continues to work tirelessly to promote, better beer and drinking local and caring about local stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of the ethos of Community Beer Works isn't exactly unknown to Flying Bison, caring about Buffalo.
Yeah.
And trying to do good stuff for the local environment and teaching people about beer.
Yeah.
So I think it's part of what we're into, for sure.
Good. I mean, speaking of Tim, I was going to bring this up. Do you? You guys must feel that Buffalo's a large enough city that can host several breweries.
Many more. Please open more breweries. Yes.
I mean,
be sure to. In fact,
I mean, I've heard. I remember reading about 2 other ones. There was one in Hamburg. It was like a brew pub. I wish.
They're.
I don't know what
they lost their lease. They were going to be in some space, and then they had to seek another space. And I'm not sure. I'm not up on what.
I remember seeing
Mainspring. I think.
I remember seeing the name.
Street. Yeah,
but it that was the last I heard of it.
I hope he's still at it, but I know that
and then
he had some problems with his.
I know there was a Nickel City something, and then I heard of a Cosmic Frog. Those are the other 2 that I heard were. At least I heard the names and blogs maybe of people.
I've met people behind both of those names. It's really it's their news to spread, I guess. Cosmic Frog, I think he's kind of both backburnered that for the time being.
Yeah, I mean, you can go on the blogs and see they haven't been updated.
Yeah,
right.
I think Nickel City is more like we're really, really in the beginning stages of starting. We don't want to come off like we've really started a brewery yet, but we intend to, and we want to start flogging this
business
brand.
Plan set.
Yeah, they want to protect their brand and whatever else, but I don't. As far as I know, they don't have a location, nor am I aware of them shopping for one. But I think they're more at the beginning, whereas I think Cosmic Frog is kind of laying low.
There's Woodcock opening up in Niagara County,
in Wilson. Woodcock Brothers.
I feel like.
Well, there's also New Buffalo.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of people in various stages of planning, and
maybe
it's
you guys
very
are somewhat inspirational.
I hope so.
That people can
That'd be great.
do this from the ground up. Have you guys found that Tim's pretty welcoming and supportive and things like that?
Sure. We've asked him questions about how to set stuff up, and we've asked him questions about the legal framework and whatever else. And he's really busy. But he's definitely always answered our questions and been nothing but enthusiastic.
Yeah. Do you think right now is Buffalo's craft beer scene, I guess, at a point where you guys could pull off starting a brewery like this?
I think so. I think that I was just out in San Diego, and San Francisco. There's so many breweries.
Oh, God,
I think that there's really not enough breweries in Buffalo. There's so much room for growth. There's so many tap handles out there. there's so many different flavors and characters you can explore.
It seems like people are willing also right now to drink premium beer, to drink.
Definitely, yeah.
I mean, if you would have told me maybe 3 years ago the business plan of Blue Monk, where it's like, yeah, our average beer is going to be like $8, and I was like, okay, well that's great. I mean, you'll be in business for 3 weeks.
But yeah,
like. But I mean, it's thriving. Like, people love going there for that beer. It just seems like Buffalo's on an upswing. I mean, I'm sure the nation as a whole is on an upswing, but I've really seen it just in the last 2 years in Buffalo.
Well, like many things in Buffalo, we're 5 to 10 years behind the trend, and that suits us pretty well right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. And you know, we mentioned Flying Bison, but other people who have been very responsible for getting Buffalonians more familiar with these kinds of beers. Absolutely, you know, the Blue Monk and the owner of that and Cole's, Mike Schatzel, and Bobby at Good Bar, and then the guys at Pizza Plant. I mean, all of these guys have been tirelessly for the last 10 years while we weren't planning a brewery, you know, planting the seeds for our brewery inadvertently by getting people into the kind of beer that we want to make. So I think that stuff really paved the way and made it possible. And, you know, our timing is great, but we are standing on the shoulders of several giants, several large people.
Yeah. Nice. I'm really looking forward to when you guys open up and everything. I mean, is that tentatively planned? I don't want a date or month even, but like,
we can do that.
Okay, sure.
Can we do that?
We can do that.
Well, let's just say that this is probably going to air in April.
Well, then we can absolutely do that. Well, then there's a very good chance that if you're listening to this podcast right now, we're open.
But check our website to make sure.
Yes, you don't want to just come rolling on down, although if we're not open, we're almost certainly there trying to open. So maybe you should just roll on down and say hi. Give us some support.
Yeah, the tentative date is April 1st, which is not a joke. But, you know, whatever regulation and things happen. But that's our realistic goal is April 1st.
Okay. Because I was tentatively going to release this April 5th.
There you go.
So this should...
Well, then we are tentatively open right now.
My tenses are so confused.
Do you guys have any plans before that to maybe... I mean, I actually haven't known... have you guys brought your beer to the public at all? Like, your ideas for what you're brewing? Or I mean, I'm sure you have... research and development groups that you figure this stuff out, but has there been a point where you guys have really and then I apologize if I've missed it.
No, we're approved to a point now where I think, you know, the truth can be told without any real worries. There were events that we've done in the past where we brought homebrew.
Okay.
And we made it very, 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 very clear, because we were a brewing plan and we were not accepted or permitted or whatever, that this was Rudy's homebrewed. And Rudy just happens to be involved with some project called Community Beer Works. And he brewed this stuff in his garage. It was in his garage. If anyone's listening, that's where it was. And so we've had opportunities for people to try the beer. Okay. Not as much as we'd like, because we just can't produce enough in the garage. But especially now that, you know, we're doing construction, we're down there all the time drinking our beer. But yeah, the next beer that anybody has will, you know, other than what you guys are drinking, is probably going to be officially produced.
Nice. And I mean, as far as like what you guys plan on selling, is it pretty much going to be a growler type? Like, are we talking bottles? Are we talking?
We're going to do. It's going to primarily be kegs.
Okay.
And those will initially be available. And please help me if I forget anywhere. Good Bar, Cole's, Blue Monk, Black Rock Kitchen and Bar.
Nice.
Village Beer Merchant.
Strong city presence.
Absolutely. And we will do some very limited bottled stuff.
Okay.
Which is going to be sold primarily out of our location, and people can come get growlers at our location.
Okay.
And we're really hoping people do come for the growlers. I mean, you know, one of the models of what we're trying to do here is to consider a place like Five Points Bakery or Lorigo's for meat, you know, getting people back to a time when shopping wasn't like going to one store and picking everything up. And I mean, I'm a dad, I got kids, I'm at Wegmans as much or more than most people, but what's better. And a model that I really need to do better, and I know Rudy does, is really go into different stores and well, it helps. But go into different stores, meeting the people who are the specialists in those products, and we've moved away from that to our detriment.
Yeah.
As a country, as a world, whatever. But a little bit of that goes a long way. And so, meeting your brewer, why not, man? When the person who's selling you your beer is the person who earlier was filtering it or cleaning up after it or whatever, you get more than just beer.
Yeah,
and I think that's something that people thrive on. Frankly, it's a spiritual sort of thing.
Is that having the customers come to the brewery? Is that in the plans as far as like the design of the place? Like, is that?
Yeah, we have a service or a retail area.
Yeah.
It's not going to be like especially fancy, but it's going to do what it needs to do, which is give us an opportunity to show you, the whole brewery will be kind of pretty much visible from there because it's not that big, and we'll be able to talk to you and fill up the growler right there, fresh. The freshest beer is the beer that you get right at the brewery. Mm-hmm. So that's what we're about.
God, that's gonna be exciting. Yeah. Have you guys just been just waiting?
Oh my god!
How long has this been going on?
How long has this been going on, man? 22 months.
Yeah, it'll be 2 years in May. I think is the earliest file on my computer.
Yeah, wow. The very first thing we did was protect the brand by getting an operating agreement together, filing an LLC, getting a Facebook page and a website, and just making, we hadn't really done much of the real planning there, but we knew,
I think
we
the
knew
very
we had
first
a name.
very first thing we did was we went around to bar owners and said, "Is this a good idea?
Right,
Can this work?
Will you please have?"
Right, and everyone was very very supportive.
Pretty positive.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Nice.
Almost 2 years it's going to be before we're finally open. And I don't actually think that for a brewery, especially in Buffalo, comprised of 7 guys, that's so bad.
No, I think it's impressive. I think it's super impressive.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, guys, thank you so much for coming down. Is there anything besides the brewery opening that we should mention? Do you guys have any plans for the summertime or
I'm going to make a lot of beer.
Selling beer, drinking beer,
going to some concerts.
Would you guys
get some concerts?
Would you guys are you guys going to try to hit up some of the beer festivals?
Yeah,
in the city?
right now we're hoping we'll be on. If this is on in April, we'll be at Beerology.
Oh, nice.
At the museum. We hope to be at the Buffalo Brew Fest. We'd like to be at the Ballpark Brew Fest too.
I missed that this year.
Yeah, this year it's going to be, I think, later, and it may be tied into Buffalo Beer Week. We'll see.
Nice.
But that one seems like promising. And, maybe we'll be going to Belgium Comes to Cooperstown, but probably not as a brewery. Probably as a bunch of guys who are total beer geeks.
Right.
There's a lot of fun in that.
We'll take our week off from the weekend off from the brewery and go to a brew fest.
Party down in Cooperstown.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Thank you guys so much for coming down. It was fun to try some of this beer. It's delicious.
Good.
Cheers.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.